today, titled Market Diversification for Asian Products. And this panel is going to be moderated by Professor Sayuri Shirai. Before we start, please allow me to have a brief introduction of Professor Sayuri Shirai. Professor Shirai has been the Asian Development Bank Institute's advisor for sustainable policies since October 2022, and is currently a professor of economics on the Keio University's Faculty of Policy Management. She's also an advisor to both Nomura Research Center for Sustainability and the Nissan Oilio Group. From 2020 to 2021, she was a senior advisor to London-based EOS at Federated Hermes, which provides environmental, social, and government-related stewardship service on firms and public policy. Prior to that, she was an ADBI visiting fellow from 2016 to 2020, a member of the policy board of the Bank of Japan from 2011 and 2016, and she taught at Sciences Po in Paris from 2007 to 2008, and served as an economics at the International Monetary Fund from 1993 to 1998. She has published extensively on topics such as central bank digital currency, monetary policy, global finance, and ESG investment. She's also a contributing writer to the Japan Times and a frequent Japanese and international media commentator on Japan's economic and global monetary policy. She also holds a PhD in economics from Columbia University. And please welcome Professor Sayuri Shirai.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel session on market diversification for Asia product. My name is Sayuri Shirai, and I will chair the session. Nowadays, as you know, Asia's economic landscape is undergoing significant transformation driven by geopolitical tension, supply chain reconfiguration, the rise of Asia as a final demand market, and the emergence of new digital framework. In this panel, we will explore how Asian economy can enhance resilience and broaden the market opportunity in this rapidly evolving environment. As we would like to devote as much time as possible to the discussion, let me give briefly the introducing today's excellent 5 panelists. First, Professor Mari Pangestu. She is currently Vice Chair of the National Economic Council, the Republic of Indonesia, and previously she was a Minister of Trade and as well as Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy of Indonesia. And then Professor Premachandra Athukorala. He's an Emeritus Professor of Economics at Australian National University. And then Dr. Saon Ray. She's currently visiting professor at India Council for Research and International Economics Relations. And then Dr. Yeongkwan Song. He's a Senior Research Fellow at Korean Development Institute. And finally, Professor Liqing Zhang. He's currently professor at Central University of Finance and Economics in China. Our session will proceed in 3 rounds. In the first 2 rounds, each panelist will have 5 to 7 minutes to respond to the question I pose to you. In the 3rd round, each panelist will provide a brief, approximately 1 minute reaction to my concluding question. After this round, we will move to the Q&A session. So for the audience, please submit your question through Q&A box as early as possible. And please indicate which panelist your question is for and keep it very brief, hopefully 1 to 2 questions. Okay, and I will select the question and direct them to the panelist. Let's start now round 1. the first round, I'd like to focus on Asia's current and future supply chain landscape and global shift. Professor Marie, you have closely followed the evolution of Asia's production network and growing role of ASEAN economies. In your view, what are the most important structural shifts now underway in Asian supply chain and emergence of new multi-hub patterns? And how should Asian economy position themselves to capture these opportunities while maintaining openness and resilience? Please.
Thank you to ADBI for organizing this panel discussion on a very important topic. Let me give the perspective. I was involved with the ASEAN Geoeconomics Task Force, which was part of the ASEAN Economic Ministers process. And it was really to answer the question that everybody is now grappling with, the uncertainties and the result of the reciprocal tariffs, as well as the overall uncertainty in the trading environment with the retreat from multilateralism and so on. So the risks that are facing ASEAN supply chains are clearly economic fragmentation coming out of the U.S. tariff, reciprocal tariffs, and this was not just the recent tariffs. Obviously, it's been going on since 2018. And the other risk that we found, this is coming out of interviews with private sector and who have supply chains in ASEAN. Also the surge in industrial output. So as part of the reciprocal tariff response, countries are also responding with trade, what we call trade diversion. So as their exports are no longer able to go to the US, they will go find other markets. So what we call surge in industrial output is also a risk that firms see in their supply chain. And then finally, the reconfiguration of economic blocks is another risk that they see. And it turns out that different sectors have a different propensity for these risks. Economic fragmentation with the US reciprocal tariffs seem to be affecting consumer electronics and consumer durables much more than other sectors, whereas the surge in industrial output, and a lot of this is coming from China, but it also comes from other countries, is automotive, machinery, and semiconductor. And in terms of reconfiguration of economic blocks, it's the labor-intensive sector like footwear, garments, and so on. That's just to give you a kind of a flavor as to how the external environment is having an effect on the reconfiguration of supply chains in ASEAN. And the finding of our survey from the private sector is that while they face these risks, they still feel that they can adjust and reconfigure the supply chain by either undertaking relocation or diversifying their supply chain with ASEAN still as a central part of the supply chain, but obviously getting more investors to come in and having relocation coming to ASEAN. And ASEAN is 70% actually said that they were confident that they could adjust their supply chains by undertaking dual sourcing, keeping higher inventories, and real-time supply chain tracking. But they all said that this is all going to increase cost, right? And that they will have to absorb the cost. And when we talk to our exporters, it's sort of a sharing of the costs in terms of the additional costs that all this is going to lead to. And it will lead to higher prices, we think, at the end of the day, to the US consumers. And that will have an effect on the consumer demand in the US, which we are our exporters and are already seeing it from the buyers' reduction in purchases. So I think what will happen is what we have recommended in the recommendations that we have made to ASEAN economic ministers is that, so how should ASEAN respond to all that? There is a risk of all those risks, economic fragmentation, surge in industrial output, and reconfiguration of economic blocks. But there is also the opportunity, as there is relocation and reconfiguration of regional supply chains. So our advice has been that ASEAN countries, which they are doing now, negotiate bilaterally with the US, as seemingly as it seems to be, or unfair as it is. We deal with the US and we are all negotiating. Malaysia has completed their negotiations, but we have to be mindful to some of the common risks that we would face, especially regarding containment of China within the supply chains, because this will have an effect. Different ASEAN countries have different dependencies on China as well as the US. And so this can affect us if we don't take a common position with regard to the economic security requests from the US. Second, what we need to do is obviously expand our own regional market, starting with ASEAN itself and then with RCEP. So from the private sector, they had very specific asks. It's not just about lowering tariffs for economic integration within ASEAN, because that's kind of already almost there in that sense. We have already reduced tariffs, but it's more the non-tariff barriers. And it's, interestingly enough, the number one issue that came up in terms of, when we asked the question to the private sector, if we want you to have a diversified supply chain with ASEAN at its center, what is the number one issue that, we as ASEAN countries should fix for you? And the answer was rules of origin. So the complex rules of origin in the different agreements are really what is also causing lack of really diversified supply chain. So maybe I'll stop there just to give you a flavor of how things are going to be changing. But there is this opportunity for the reconfiguration of supply chains, and I think it will happen in all the sectors that I mentioned.
Thank you very much, Mali. So ASEAN countries, it appears that they are quite resilient, and then they may be able to adjust to these changes in the US tariff policy. But also as ASEAN, it's very important to have a collective, some kind of agreement with regards to cost and then maybe economic security concerns. Thank you very much. So next, I'd like to move to Yeongkwan. So South Korea is deeply embedded in the Asian production network. Could you comment on how recent US trade tariff policy have affected Korea's key manufacturing sectors, such as automobile, heavy industries? And looking ahead, how do you see Korean firms reorganizing their Asia-wide supply chain in response to these policy shift? Please.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank ADBI for organizing this very important and timely panel, and to the distinguished guests and distinguished panelists and participants. And definitely President Trump's trade policy poses a serious threat to Korea's manufacturing sector. His approach can be summarized as like two things, like first, America first at home and China out abroad. Okay? One of the America first side, he's imposing tariff the world has never seen in almost a century. Right? And these tariffs become a major risk for Korean export to the US, just like they are for many other countries. Right? US account for around 20% of Korea's manufacturing export. So Trump's tariffs are particularly very damaging for industry like steel, which facing 50% of tariff, and automobile and auto part. Initially it was faced with 25%, and now it lowered to 15% tariff. And his push to exclude China is also a major threat to Korean manufacturing export. Since the year 2000, China has played a critical role in Korea's manufacturing production structure. And Korea's manufacturing has relied heavily on the import of Chinese intermediate goods, about 22%. And Korea also depends heavily on China for rare and critical materials. And also on the export side, many Korean intermediate goods go to China and get built into final product and then get exported to the US. So because Korea and China are deeply tied through global supply chains, US effort to push China out of this global supply chain it is become a major threat to Korean manufacturing. And now the next question is how Korea firms will restructure this Korean supply chain across Asia. If the US continues its China exclusion strategy, even after Trump, Korean manufacturers, we have no choice but to scale down the supply chains we have built in China over the past 30 years. I think there's no alternatives. Under the US pressure, Korean companies have already promised a large investment commitment in the US. It's very huge something. But expanding production in the US comes with major constraints. Like for one, building a factory in the US take a long time because of environmental regulations and lack of experience of Korean firms construct factory in the US. And even after the factory is built, this they need Korean engineers, but US visa issues make this extremely difficult. Recently, at the Hyundai LG joint battery plant site in Georgia, US immigration authorities detained nearly 300 Korean engineers. This highlights how unstable the visa policies in the US can be. Okay? So producing in the US is almost far more expensive. Some estimates say nearly triple the cost. It's very huge. So it's very difficult to build production site in the US, and Mexico is another option. But given migration tensions between the US and Mexico, heavy investment there carries its own risk. So to reduce the dependence on China, Korea firms like to expand production not in the US or Mexico, but in more countries like ASEAN members, Australia, India, and maybe Mongolia and Central Asia in the future. We already seeing these kinds of trends. Korea investment in China has plunged recently, overseas investment, while overseas investment in Vietnam has surged. We can see this trend in data. And Korea is uniquely positioned because it's only major manufacturing nations among China, Germany, and Japan that actually have an FTA with the US. Even though Trump ignored this Korea-US FTA, it was ratified by US Congress and Korean Congress. So US president have no authority to revoke it. So meaning that it will recover after the Trump. Okay? And also Korea has an FTA with EU and even China. Okay? So as long as US policy continues to exclude China, Korea is naturally positioned to become a key country in global supply chain. And among Korea's future partners, ASEAN and Australia is inevitably play central roles. Central Asian economies rich in rare and critical materials,
Mm.
this will become increasingly important node in global supply chain.
Mm. Okay. Thank you very much. So you clearly describe the difficulty Korea is facing because of the very close relationship through supply chain with China, but also very costly to invest in the US. So also Mexico sensitivity issue. And so you also try to diversify market into Central Asia, etc. Thank you very much. Okay, so now let's move to Professor Liqing. So China remains central to regional manufacturing. How have recent US tariff measures affected China's industrial sectors? Is the issue of industrial oversupply showing some sign of easing? And do you see shifting China's outward investment and regional economic engagement as companies adjust to these pressures? Please.
Thank you very much, Professor Shirai, and also I'm very grateful for ADBI for inviting me to this great event. As China's is the the third largest trade partner of the United States, so. It is quite for sure Trump's reciprocal tariff policy will have big impacts on China's overall economic growth and related sectors. Considering the tariffs imposed in the first term of Trump administration, roughly 20%, if the reciprocal and other tariffs announced earlier this year were eventually realized, the total tariffs against the Chinese goods could increase up to 40 to 50%, including 10 to 20% related to Fantenis and 34% that is a reciprocal. So much impressively we need to see is that in 2017, the tariffs only 3%. Since negotiation between these two countries are still ongoing, it is not quite clear how severe this impact will be. It is noticed that after the Busan summit in South Korea last month, the United States has canceled the first round of Fantenis tariffs, that is 10%, and suspended the 24% of reciprocal tariffs for 1 year, suspended. This new development has eased the tension of trade friction to some degree. For secretary perspective, the impacts of Trump's tariffs are differentiated. First, because of the US has previously significantly increased tariffs on China's EV, battery, and solar equipment, basically higher than 34%, and has already hurt China's export to the United States largely. So this time, the impact of reciprocal tariffs is relatively small. However, since the reciprocal tariffs have significant impact on many countries around the world, at least 10%, maybe more, some of them are overseas production base of Chinese companies, such as Vietnam, Thailand, for circumventing US tariffs. So tariffs in these countries, towards these countries, will indirectly affect China's export to the United States. Secondly, the semiconductor and electronic products are affected to different degrees. In terms of semiconductor products, the US has imposed tariffs of 25 to 100%. And so-called Section 301. So the impact of reciprocal tariffs will be limited for these goods. Electronic products covering mobile phone, computers, televisions, and etc. Since these almost account nearly half of the Sino-US trade, so if the 24% tariffs cannot be waived or reduced years later, these products, the electronic products will be badly hurt. Third, the traditional manufactured goods such as steel and aluminum will be significantly affected by US tariffs. In addition to the 24% reciprocal tariffs, the United States also imposed separate tariffs on these goods. So this industry will face great challenges. Indeed, the export of steel and aluminum to the United States has declined over 30% since 2018. Fifth, textile and clothing, including various fabrics, yarns, and ready-to-wear, are important parts of China's exports to the United States. They will be significantly affected. Finally, the US has stopped tariffs exemption for small packages under $800 and imposed a tariff of 30% or $50 per piece. The end of this exemption policy will greatly hurt China's cross-border immerse operation and its export to the United States. Yes, as a response to the Trump's tariffs hiking, Chinese firms has been trying to restructure their global markets by increasing the share in One Belt, One Road initiative country, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Europe and Latin America. As part of this strategy, they have actively expanded their outward investment to this country, either creating new markets or circumventing the US tariffs. Indeed, this wave started almost 5 years ago. From 2021 till early this year, Chinese firms set up almost 36,000 overseas branches. The strategy is basically successful. Over the past 2 or 3 years, the exports to so-called 3 new products, that is EV, battery, and solar, increased dramatically in these areas.
Yes.
So,
could you wrap up?
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make one last point. That is China's response for another perspective. Making economic growth more relying on domestic demand, particularly consumption rather than export, has been part of China's economic transformation. Indeed, China's central government has been trying to reduce the oversupply of EV, battery, solar by curbing disorderly competition at local and regional level. However, since the weak domestic demand, particularly weak consumption, is mainly caused by structural problems, such as insufficient supply of social security network, together with a collapse of real estate market. China must continue to rely on the export in the foreseeable future, in some sense, some degree. That is the reality. Yeah.
Yeah,
stop
thank you very
here.
much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much. Okay, so you described the China's challenges. This time, the diverse tariffs is affecting various sectors, and also this time, also Asian and many other countries are subject to tariff. So China, the companies are also producing there. So there is also a lot of impact through there. Thank you very much. So now let's move to Saon. Saon, India has attracted the considerable global attention as a potential new manufacturing hub, supported by its large market, digital capability, and recent FTA with ASEAN. What are the key barriers that still prevent India from being more deeply integrated into Asian supply chain? Please. Sound muted.
It has been muted.
Sound muted. We cannot hear you.
Hello.
Yes,
Can you
yes,
hear me
please.
now?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Professor Shirai and ADBI, for allowing me to present my views. Now, in the context of the question that you asked, but before I come to that, I'll just briefly talk about the US impact on India, because India has been one of the countries which has been very severely affected by the Trump tariffs, 25% plus 25% of tariffs on India. And particularly some of the sectors that have been mentioned by the other panelists, we are very much impacted. Our exports to the US is about 18%. Particularly for the labor-intensive sectors, we are very much impacted. So let me come to your question about India becoming a manufacturing hub and what do we see in that. So in terms of production, we are about $461 billion in 2023, and it's about the third largest producer of pharma by volume, second largest producer of crude steel, etc. But if you look at the share in terms of exports, we are still very small. So it is about 1.8% of world's export, and it is the 17th largest export market. So what are the key barriers that are still there as far as India is concerned and vis-a-vis the ASEAN region? And so some of these are very well known, competitiveness, there are structural barriers, turnaround time in ports, it takes a long time to basically export or import, or basically clear customs, etc. Sometimes there are problems of inverted duty structure, that intermediate goods attract more tariffs than final goods. Uncertainty in policy, that is with respect to Indian policy. Sometimes there are these changes in policies which are very abrupt and affect investors significantly. Though in terms of logistics and infrastructure, India has made a lot of improvement, but there is a lot of scope still to do better. And so I'll just come to this table, which basically shows you some of the comparative figures for India and ASEAN. So the average port time, turnaround time is about less than 1 day for India, but for many of the other ASEAN countries, it is much, much lower than that. Similarly, time taken to export or import, it is about 40 to 44 hours for India, and it's about 18 to 36 hours for Singapore. Average MFN duty is in the range of 10.7 to 15.9% for India and 6.5% for the ASEAN. Similarly, other things like, electricity cost, it is about $0.09 to $0.14 for India, but it is significantly lower. For example, for Malaysia, it is about 0.04 to 0.023, and the highest in the region seems to be Singapore at $0.23. Similarly, the logistics cost, India is about 8%, but on an average for the ASEAN countries, it is about 5%. Likewise, for infrastructure, transport, storage, utilities, etc., as well as warehousing costs. So all of these are improving, but there is still a lot of scope for improvement. And in terms of Indian ASEAN trade, India and ASEAN do have a agreement, an FTA in place, but the imports by ASEAN from India is about only 9 to 10%, and it is actually concentrated in a few particular products, and like engineering goods and machinery and organic, inorganic chemicals, etc. So there is, in fact, a lot of scope, at least for labor-intensive products like textile products and leather, which have particularly this becomes important in the context of President Trump's tariffs, because if we are losing the US market, the ASEAN could be one area where we could actually look to export. And there is a two-way value chain linkage in things like auto parts and components and electricals and garments. But this actually is still, there is a lot of potential. It's still underutilized. And so some of the other sectors which have greater value chain integration potential include electronics, electricals and machinery, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, healthcare devices, and agri-food, processed foods and feed. So I'll stop here for the moment and maybe come back.
Okay, thank you very much. So you also described the impact of US tariff on India is very, very big. And also you talked about while improving, there is some structural barriers in India which hamper greater, deeper integration into supply chain. Thank you very much. So now I'd like to move to Premachandra. Chandra, you have studied production network across China, ASEAN, India for many years. After hearing this country perspective, how do you interpret the current configuration of Asian supply chain, and why have the impact of US tariff hikes on Asian export? Although it's very big, but it's somewhat smaller than everybody expected, beyond this WTO information technology agreement, which keeps many ICT products tariff-free. And what structural features explain this resilience? Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you very much, Sayuri.
Yes.
If I have correctly followed, you want me to focus on three important issues. The first one is what would be the implication of Trump tariff, how it's going to clash with the ITA agreement. The second point is why the actual tariff has been much lower than what Trump announced initially. Thirdly, how this would impact on reconfiguration of global production network. Let me comment on this in the reverse order, because that will help you to focus more on the first issue. Say, ITA agreement, Information Technology Agreement, has been one of the most important achievement of WTO process. It has provided the setting for the globalization of IT industry, which account for about 30 to 40% of manufacturing trade. And US is a signatory to Information Technology Agreement 1. They have not signed 2. However, ITA 1 covers number of very important information technology products, including semiconductor, which is at the heart of global manufacturing. And every product, starting from smartphone to motor vehicle, aeroplane, a critical input is the semiconductor. Trump threatened to introduce 25% duty on. If that happens, if the semiconductor producers pass on the cost, then it would have ramification across many industries. However, there is a qualification here. Trump has not yet introduced 25% tariff. Secondly, he's a negotiating man. In the process of negotiating, he has given concession to many producers. For instance, when the Apple CEO started negotiating with Trump, he decided to allow duty-free exports of IT handphone 17 from India. It is duty-free. And he got a lot of duty-free concession from export from China, as Professor Liqing mentioned. The second point you want to consider is that ITA products, particularly semiconductors, are related to Trump's industrial policy as well. Now, Trump has given $1 billion of subsidies for TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor producer, and Samsung, and many other firms to set up fabs, the high-end semiconductor production. But high-end semiconductor production is embedded in the global supply chain. For instance, TSMC do fabrication, but assembly, testing, and packaging happen in Taiwan, Malaysia, and so on. And Malaysia has at least 5 subcontractors operating within this network. Therefore, Trump's industrial policy is not going to de-link significantly the East Asian countries from this supply network. Therefore, my feeling is that the fear is unwarranted. It can have uncertain impact and so on, but the fear is unwarranted. Second point you raise is why the actual tariff has been lower than the declared tariff. Now, to answer this question, I want to make a distinction between statutory tariff, that means actually declared tariff, and the effective tariff rate, which is tariff revenue as a percentage of actual import to the US. Now, if you look at statutory tariff, once the Liberation Day tariff was announced, Budget Lab at Yale University estimated the average possible tariff at about 27%, which was much higher than the 1930s Smoot-Hawley tariff. That's why it triggered a big fear. Look at what has happened. The statutory tariff rate now is about 15%. I mean, as New York Times reporter said, Trump always chickens out. He backtracked from what he proposes. Therefore, statutory tariff is much lower. Secondly, effective tariff rate is even lower. Now, at present, effective tariff rate is less than 10% compared to statutory tariff. A lot of factors have contributed to this vast difference between rhetoric and reality. We have to take this into account when you talk about policy. Then your third point relates to configuration of value chain in Asia. Now, when you look at actual tariff rates imposed on these countries, there are no significant difference in tariff rate among countries. Therefore, reconfiguration among countries in the region is not going to be very great, right? But the most important point is the uncertainty created by Trump's strategy. Therefore, for the region, most important thing is the China plus strategy. Multinational enterprises are not going to ignore China, but look at other production bases to complement. This emphasis is going to be much greater in future because of the uncertainty. Therefore, countries should prepare to benefit from this, right? To do your own reforms. Thank you. I'll stop at that point.
Thank you very much. Very good. You explained about the impact of tariff on ICT, and also there is a difference between statutory and effective tariff and the configuration. Thank you very much. Now we'd like to move to the second round. It's about regional frameworks, digital trade, new area of cooperations. Mali, you served as a co-chair of ASEAN Geoeconomics Task Force Expert Group, and this just prepared the inaugural ASEAN Geometrics report, which is going to be published next week. And so you're very familiar with ASEAN, and now ASEAN is a center of RCEP, CPTPP, and the network of bilateral FTA. This is great, but also it has some challenge with regards to spaghetti ball overlapping trade rules. How can ASEAN strengthen its role as a connector in this context, and especially digital trade, supply chain facilitation, standard cooperation? Please.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think ASEAN at the moment, its value lies in the fact that it can be a bridge. Its networks link both the RCEP members, which is the 10 ASEAN countries, plus Japan, Korea, China, Australia, and New Zealand. And there are already a number of ASEAN countries who are CPTP members. And Indonesia is applying to join CPTPP, as well as a number of other ASEAN countries. So I think between ASEAN being the bridge for the RCEP, the CPTPP, I think the potential for bilateral FTAs that are coming forth, especially with Europe, because Vietnam already has a bilateral FTA with Europe, so does Singapore. India just signed its agreement with Europe, and Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia are also coming forth. So I think there is room for ASEAN to be like in the middle of that network in a centralized way. And now that we have somebody from India here, we still hope that India will join RCEP, actually, because I think that will really make us really as an Asian region really connected. And it is really about the response that we need to design in this very uncertain world. Even though the Trump tariffs at the end of the day may look, as Premachandra said, maybe it's not as high as what it seemed to be, but it's still uncertain because anytime he can raise it, and it's beyond tariffs. It's the economic security issues actually that we worry a lot about, which is about containing the content of China or even Chinese firms within our network. So it is, I think, the way to respond is to really enhance your own regional networks and economic integration. The U.S. accounts for 13% of world trade. 87% of trade is with the rest of the world, including us in it, right? So we should be continuing to expand trade, conduct open regionalism, support the multilateral framework because it has served us well, the rules-based system and so on. So I think if you ask me what our specific recommendations for ASEAN economic integration, we looked at the issues, and we also heard from the private sector. And as I mentioned earlier, clear and common rules of origin, as you said, to avoid the spaghetti bowl, and cumulative rules of origin within RCEP seems to be one important ask. The other asks are not new, but it is more about ASEAN has all these agreements. Why don't you, the business people are saying, you need to implement them and implement them effectively, including the removal of non-tariff barriers and ASEAN single window, seamless flow of goods and services, as well as people, actually, between the ASEAN countries. So just making sure your actual agreements are working. And then digital trade is the next frontier. There is a digital economic framework agreement that should have been signed this year, but somehow didn't happen. But next year, hopefully that will be signed, and that will lead to trusted cross-border data flows, aligned standards, and digital payment links. So that will be another area of development for ASEAN. And in terms of supply systems, they do need upgrades, fast border checks, link single windows, and simpler non-tariff rules. This was the ask from the business sector. And really, regional initiatives work best when tied to domestic reform. A number of the countries are undertaking a lot of domestic reforms, including Indonesia and Vietnam. And this is it should be part of your regional economic integration. And I think part of the way we need to also have an agency role in terms of maintaining the rules-based trading system. And we provide really, the idea is we need to have coordinated diversification within the Asian region. You cannot have too much dominated or concentration of China. Therefore, how do we diversify it, including obviously with China in terms of the investment and cooperation that needs to happen. That is, I think, the answer to a vibrant Asian region and a truly diversified regional supply chain. Because I don't think the uncertainty will stop with Trump ending in 3 years' time. I think the issue of the U.S.-China geoeconomic rivalry is going to continue. So it's up to us and adjust as well as regional in our regional economic integration. I mean, the only final thing I would say is that the new area I think for ASEAN cooperation would be in the green industries, because all of us have to green transition, energy transition, and renewables, and so on. And this will be the new areas for cooperation within the economic integration.
Yes. Thank you very much, Marie. You highlighted the importance of rule-based trading system, and also we need to take into account economic security and developing our own regional and multilateral integration, and probably more diversified rather than depending on one country. It will be very important. Thank you very much. Now, Premachandra. So RCEP, CPTPP, multiple bilateral FTA now shape Asia's trade architecture. How is this agreement influencing investment and value chain decisions? In addition, you wrote a paper on Indonesia, and you pointed out in the paper that Indonesia has not been really successful in emerging as a major global supplier in manufacturing value chains. Please explain.
Yeah. Sayuri, again, you have raised two issues. Generally, my views about various regional trade agreement, and within that, why Indonesia is lagging behind other countries in reaping gain by joining global production network. Let me respond to the first question. Of course, regional agreements are important for two things: to enhance the bargaining position of countries in the region in negotiation with Trump and other things. Secondly, it is a very important vehicle for, interchanging ideas and then have a cohesive, unified position. But frankly, I do not agree with the point that these agreements will have a significant impact on trade flows and investment flows in the region. Of course, GTAP modelers have come with big figures, but the beauty of GTAP simulation is that by tweaking assumption, you can get what you want, right? But when you look at systematic studies of actual usage of FTAs in the region, the picture is not very rosy. The actual utilization rate of this agreement is around 20 to 30%. Why it is the case? Simply because these countries are low tariff countries, but at the same time, to become eligible for tariff concessions, you ought to meet draconian rules of origin, as Mari pointed out initially. Therefore, actually, I have interviewed some firms. They simply shun this agreement simply because admin cost and other delays and all that involved in getting rules of origin certificate is much greater than the concession you get from these agreements. Therefore, do not place too much emphasis on this agreement as a way of impacting on trade and investment. Another key point here is that the individual countries gain from trade with others depend on trade complementarity between these countries. Many of these countries are middle-income countries, and then their complementarity lies with the rest of the world, right? Therefore, focusing on too much on increase in aggregate demand within the region as a solution to the tariff war is little bit exaggerated.
Okay,
That's
okay.
my point. Secondly, briefly to comment on Indonesia, actually, the paper you mentioned is now available on Google Scholar website freely. My colleague, Professor Arianto and I, we have analyzed Indonesian experience in linking global production network, generally globalization, over the last 70 years. And people talk about many things like custom procedures and come up with big list why Indonesia is playing a big role. Actually, according to data, out of total GVC trade in the region, Indonesia's share is only 8%, whereas newcomer Vietnam account for closer to 28%. Our inference of the paper is basically this reflects Indonesia's policy ambivalence in benefiting from global economic integration. Two recent examples should be negotiation with Foxconn. Before coming to India, Foxconn wanted to go to Indonesia. They started negotiate with the Foreign Investment Authority in 2019. But the discussion is going on, and India benefited from that. Then look at the recent Apple saga. Indonesian policymakers simply did not understand the nature of Apple's globalization strategy. Apple does not produce a single handphone. But the Indonesian authorities wanted Apple to set up handphone production in the country by imposing tariff. Then the negotiation went on. Eventually, Indonesia got little bit investment and all that for peripheral activities, and Apple turned out to be the biggest gainer by allowing the market to open the Indonesian market for its export. It is a reflection of policy ambivalence, nothing else. Thank you.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. You importantly highlighted that while it's a regional arrangement, FTA, very important, but rule of origin issues, it's not fully utilized. And also your remark about Indonesia, about policy ambiguity is quite important. Now, let's move to Liqing. Under RCEP, and China recently had signed FTA 3.0 with ASEAN. How do you see China's role evolving in a regional digital trade network? We also see progress in cross-border digital payment using local currency, which may gradually reduce reliance on US dollars. How significant are these developments for China's regional economic engagement and the ongoing supply chain diversification? Please, Liqing.
Okay, thank you. Let me try to answer your questions, but I think some of them are very challenged. As we have seen that RCEP provides a solid institutional arrangement and policy support for collaboration between China and ASEAN in the field of digital economy. Among other things, RCEP has set up a couple of basic principles for digital trade in this area, including number one, member states should prohibit tariffs on electronic transmissions, which significantly reduce the risk and the cost of digital trade. Number two, member states should protect the rights and interests of online consumers and combat fraud business practice. Number three, member states should recognize the importance of cross-border data flows for trade. Yet, the provision shows certain flexibility. That is, it contains a wide range of public policy exceptions that allows member states to take restrictive measures to protect the so-called fundamental security interests. These principles are very important, and you mentioned China-ASEAN free trade agreement, free trade area version 3.0. Yes, I found that has done some of updates in the area of digital trade and other economic cooperation areas. The new version more focused on the formulating cooperation rules in emerging fields, strengthening regulatory docking and standard cooperation, improving supply chain resilience, green economy, and small, medium, micro enterprises. I think under the garden of RCEP and the new version of China-ASEAN trade, free trade area, China has strengthened and will continue to strengthen economic trade cooperation with ASEAN, especially in the field of digital economy and digital trade. First of all, we will strengthen policy coordination and strategic alignment with other Asian countries, particularly in the ASEAN countries, in the digital economy areas. Secondly, through tariffs reductions, simplification of custom clearance, and the protection of consumers' rights, the level of cross-border e-trade facilitation has been significantly improved. According to the data, in recent years, the cross-border e-commerce transaction volume between China and ASEAN has grown at an average annual rate of more than 20%, which has become an important driving force for the growth of trade in this area. Third, continue to strengthen cooperation in the area of digital infrastructure construction. China's advantage in 5G network, data centers, cross-border optical cables, and other areas, providing strong support for the digital transformation in this area. For example, China has carried out 5G digital infrastructure cooperation national data center construction projects in Thailand, Malaysia, and other countries. Fourth, China will strengthen cooperation in digital talent training and capacity building. Chinese universities and vocational training institutions have cooperated with educational institutions in Asian countries to carry out joint education, academic exchange, and talent training programs. Let me move to the digital payment area.
Yes.
The cooperation between China and Asia has also made much progress. For instance, many countries have started to work with China's tech giants such as ICRIER and Tencent. In 2024, PayNet Malaysia announced a cooperation with WeChat Pay, enable more than 2 million Malaysia stores to support WeChat Pay. Besides, in 2022, the Monetary Authority in China, Thailand, United Arab Emeritus, and the BIS started to work on Embridge, a digital currency project run by central banks. To facilitate, better facilitate cross-border payments. So far, the infrastructure of this pilot project has almost been finalized. Last year, 20 commercial banks from 4 countries and regions successfully complete first real transaction pilot. During the tests, a total of 164 cross-border payments occurred, with the settlement around equivalent to more than 150 million yuan. Based on research by BIS, the Embridge can process each payment within 6 to 9 seconds, while cross-border transactions currently processed through the traditional banking sectors normally need 2 to 5 days. So this is a very efficient change if we take the Embridge. At the same time, using the Embridge can also significantly save the cost of cross-border payments. At least the 50% cost will be off.
Yes.
I will stop here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liqing. So I think digital trade is becoming very important beyond e-commerce. What we have to pay attention to security interests. Now we are talking about digitization of custom, invoice, and also, as you mentioned, cross-border digital payment is becoming very important, not only through CBDC, but also through QR payment, retail, fast payment connection. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move to Saon. So India's digital capability are world-class. And India is expanding cross-border digital payment systems such as UPI, and then this also could reduce the dependence on the US dollars. Could digital trade payment network become India's pathway to deeper Asian integration? What governance and trust framework would be necessary to scale these arrangements across Asia? So, please.
Yes, thank you. India actually is using what is called the UPI, the United Payments Interface. It's an Indian digital payment system developed by NPCI in 2016, which allows transfer of money between bank accounts using a mobile device. Basically, it creates a UPI ID, which is like an email address for payments, and which you could use as a phone number, or you could use a QR code for scanning, and the payment is instantaneously, as Professor Zhang also mentioned. UPI actually supports 24/7 real-time peer-to-peer and person-to-person transactions, and it is connected through a system of various apps, so Google Pay, Phone Pay, Paytm, all of that. Now, why is UPI important? Because this is it's based on the foundational technology which supports India's cross-border digital trade and financial integration with the region. And UPI actually can facilitate real-time low-cost payment and enhancing trade exchange, etc. It can enable SMEs and small exporters participation in GVCs. It can support digital commerce, tourism, and growing remittance flows. It can reduce forex and transaction costs, making trade more competitive. And it, of course, can strengthen India's geo-economic integration and digital connectivity. Now, the local currency settlement, and in this also I would talk about Project Nexus. Local currency settlement, which India has at the moment, is with UAE. It's in the INR and United Arab Dirham mechanism, which allows exporters and importers to invoice and settle directly in rupees. And it basically cuts down the dollar intermediation, foreign exchange costs, and settlement time, making it much faster. And it can be replicated to other Asian partners, which can actually improve regional trade. Now, the Reserve Bank of India, RBI, has officially joined the Project Nexus, which is an international initiative by the BIS, which basically aims to connect the fast payment systems of India with 4 ASEAN countries, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And they will actually be the founding members and first movers of this platform. This platform is expected to be operational by 2026. And basically, the benefits of this would be that it can interlink the domestic fast payment system of India through the Project Nexus to instantaneous cross-border payments and reduce significantly the transaction time as well as costs. The cost will be associated basically the cross-border transactions, and it will basically benefit both consumers and business. It will enhance the reach. Basically, it'll move from bilateral to multilateral connectivity and expand the international reach of Indian payment systems and facilitate a smoother and widespread adoption of UPI and this fast payment systems. It will also enable faster and cheaper cross-border trade and enhance trade and commerce between these 2 countries. Now, of course, the thing is that the other things that are in place, for example, India is now also has a UPI Pay Now type arrangement, which is with Singapore's UPI and India's UPI and Singapore's Pay Now, which actually allows firms to receive payments from buyers without the complex banking relationships. And then there are things like interoperability, common or compatible standards for messaging, APIs, etc. It is again built on BIS's Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructure work, which interlinks fast payment systems and Project Nexus, which will standardize the rules and data across multiple jurisdictions. This will also enable basically mutual recognition and convergence of rules on KYC and AML. And so things like, e-signatures, digital identity, etc., which are necessary for these payment to move these payments. It can be used, and it can India can leverage its experience with Aadhaar, the digital identity of India, with other kinds of schemes that are there in ASEAN, for example, SingPass or Thailand's NTID, etc. This can also help in fast and cheap settlements in local currencies, just-in-time payments, etc., and cross-border tourism. And these newer kinds of forms of, gig services, etc., can also benefit from this. So all in all, I think it is very forward-looking, but there is a lot of scope, and it can bring a lot of convergence between these 2 countries, between India and ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you highlighted very important progress happening within India, but is India and other Asian countries, especially this fast payment system, this connection with ASEAN, India is very important, reducing cost of settlement, and also we don't need to rely too much on the US dollars. And then this BIS project Nexus is very important. And probably it may able to connect CBDC and also in the future. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to talk to Yeongkwan. I want to ask you about critical mineral. Critical mineral rare earths are becoming very important for EVs, batteries, and semiconductors. And how realistic is it for Asia to build a more diversified, secure, critical mineral ecosystem? And what form of regional coordination, such as standard joint investment or shared stockpile, would be required to achieve this? Please. Yeah, muted. Yeongkwan, muted.
Oh,
Yes.
now you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. As you know, we already have a strong global supply chain in East Asia. Yeah? The Korea, Japan, China are strongly connected. But so the more relevant question would be how much ASEAN or possibly Central Asia can step up and join this global supply chain. That would be more relevant question. But the potential is very high, but we still have a long way to go, as you know. As you know, Indonesia and Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Myanmar, Laos, and especially the Mongolia, hold the significant reserve of critical materials and rare earth. And these ASEAN economies have abundant copper, nickel, cobalt, and tin, that exactly the minerals essential for EV batteries and renewable energy systems and advanced semiconductors. If these countries move beyond extraction and expand into refining, I'm sorry, and processing and even midstream manufacturing, Asia could generally build a diversified and secure critical material ecosystem for EV batteries and chips. So to materialize these potentials, various type of regional corporations may need it. First, I think as a first step, the most important thing is the investment, capital and technology. So like Korea and Japan's investment and technology would be essential for kickstart this potential to materialize. To make this vision real, investment from Korea and Japan into resource-rich ASEAN countries will be crucial. The idea is to combine ASEAN's mineral endowment with Korean and Japanese capital and technology, so these countries can grow their midstream industries, and reduce dependence on China-centric supply chain. So resource-rich ASEAN economies and places like sorry, Mongolia do not remain a simple raw material supplier. So they need, I'm sorry. Something happened on my throat. I'm very sorry about that.
It's okay.
So, no, so ASEAN countries, they need to develop value chains that include mining, refining, processing, and intermediate good production. And maybe joint development and processing of critical materials among ASEAN countries would be needed. One practical step is for so first Korean and Japanese firm to set up joint venture with other countries and build this facility. And also local infrastructure with advanced technology to shift more value-added production into the region is necessary. So, and maybe, you know, the building the regional specialized production structure would be needed, and maybe we need a regional division of labor. For example, nickel in Indonesia and tin in Malaysia and rare earth in Vietnam. So firms can build specialized processing hub that strengthen flexibility and resilience in supply chain. In order to make this vision real, we need very strong intra-ASEAN cooperation as well as joining Korea and Japan and maybe Australia and New Zealand. You know, as Professor Mari and Professor Premachandra mentioned, the rule of origin is the main hindrance to make this dream happens. But in RCEP and also CPTPP, they they contain the provision called cumulative rules of origin. So with this cumulative rules of origin, it doesn't matter whether you produce as long as you remain in the block. Okay? So I think the cumulative rule of origin could be a game changer. And you know, the RCEP only implemented 3 years ago, and it takes time. Okay? So, and also we may strengthen our effort to cooperation with this RCEP concept. But you know, RCEP is relatively weak implemented, and so we may need more strong inter cooperation mechanism. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So everybody know we need to develop more diversify, secure this critical mineral network, and as Yeongkwan mentioned, you know, technology from Korea and Japan, maybe also from Australia, and there are lots of resource-rich countries in Asia, and then you know we'll have to make sure that we'll have a higher value added. You know, in this in this industry, so sort of regional specialized production structure can be important. So deeper discussion will be very important. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to finally move to section 3, and I'd like to invite each panelist to respond to my final question, 1 minute each. What is the single most important policy Asia should pursue to achieve deeper and higher valued economic integration? Let's start with Saon. Saon, please.
Yes, thank you. So basically market diversification, that is important, not only to counter the uncertainty that we have, but as there may be uncertainty in the future, so diversifying markets is always a good thing. And of course, you know, the other things that people have talked about, resilience, deepening regional integration, and shifting of the final consumer demand to the Asian, because Asia is actually the growth center of the world now. And so keeping that in mind. Thank you.
Okay. Yeongkwan?
Looking ahead, I think the single most important policy for deeper and higher value-added integration in Asia is expanding the CPTPP. You know, RCEP is already in place, but widening it and increasing its level of liberalization is politically very hard. And CPTPP, by contrast, is more advanced, and it has higher standard rules and stronger institutional framework that better support modern supply chains, including full cumulative rules of origin provision, as I mentioned. Okay, so for countries serious about reform, Joining CPTPP provides greater openness and stronger policy disciplines than RCEP. And broader RCEP participants would be also have is investors' concern about institutional stability and attract more long-term investment into regional value chains. The key advantage is that CPTPP includes ISDS, Investor State Dispute Settlement, which is a mechanism that allows foreign investors to resolve dispute with host country through international arbitration, which greatly increases the confidence for firms investing in developing countries. 4 ASEAN members are already CPTPP participants. Indonesia and Philippines have applied, and others like Thailand are considering it. Korea is not yet a member of CPTPP, but Korea also should move forward despite sensibility around agricultural market opening. And if the EU, they show their interest joining CPTPP, if EU eventually join, barring the UK, it will help reverse the protectionist tilt created by Trump-era trade policy and strengthen ASEAN integration with major global markets. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Liqing?
Okay, 2 points very briefly. Number one, facing with Trump's tariff shock and very likely chance of further deglobalization, Asian countries should work more closely and accelerate the regional economic integration by making RCEP and other FTA agreements more successful, and also making CPTPP more inclusive. Number two, while economic and trade integration have been made much progress in Asian area, the monetary and financial integration has been at a relatively low level. In the future, China, Japan, Korea, and Asia should work more closely to accelerate the monetary and financial cooperation to support the integration in trade and economic aspects. Among others, the following areas should be very important. That is, they are promoting RMB internationalization and other local currency usage, speeding up the process of digital payment, particularly the cooperation in the area of CBDC, and strengthening the regional financial safety net, including upgrading CMIM into AMF, Asian Monetary Fund. I'm stuck here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Premachandra.
Yeah. We live in a world caught in the ever-shifting diplomacy between two superpowers. In this context, I think the most sensible option for most countries in the region is what EU economists call principled pragmatism, meaning a hybrid strategy that balances multilateral diplomacy aimed at reducing dependence on any single country with economic pragmatism designed to enhance domestic capabilities, resilience, and bargaining power. As I mentioned in my previous presentation, China Plus strategy is going to open up more opportunities for these countries. Then to set the stage for that, we need this type of policy. Aggregate demand in the region is important. I do not think we should depend too much on domestic aggregate demand in the region, because the complementary of these countries in the global trade with the rest of the world, because of low income level relatively, complementarity among these countries is very limited on aggregate demand side. Thank you.
Okay, Marie?
Yes, I think we have to accept that the world is different and it's not going to go back to any kind of normal order that we are used to. Therefore, it is up to countries and regions to really build up its resilience, domestic resilience and regional resilience. And for regional resilience, I really think an open and predictable regional order is the best defense against shocks and the best path to higher value chains. Now, and domestic reforms must support this effort. I agreed with Premachandra about the issue about Indonesia's problems of not being able to take advantage of many of the regional economic integration. But so domestic reforms must accompany the regional economic integration. And I think whether it's RCEP, CPTPP, or even OECD, because Indonesia is exceeding the OECD, I believe in what I call, maybe in line with what Prem was saying, pragmatism. I call it constructive incrementalism, that you need to do not just one, but you need to do several of these economic integration processes, and RCEP and CPTPP being one that is really in front of you. And RCEP has it's implemented, but it's not effective. And part of that is because of the lack of utilization of the rules of origin. And that is one of the big homework. And we have made a big recommendation how to improve that, as well as the non-tariff barriers. And RCEP it has to be reviewed by 2027. And it can actually take some of the more progressive components that is in CPTPP as part of its RCEP. And I think really Asia needs stronger regional economic integration based on open markets. And whether it's China +1 or diversified within China and Korea and Japan, I think this is what we should be aiming for. And that is the best defense we have towards this uncertain world.
Thank you very much. Now we move to the Q&A session, but I think it may be a good idea that we ask panelists if the panelists have a question to other panelists. Maybe you can raise hand. Okay, Arif. Arif, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Sayuri. This is basically questions to all the panelists. Yesterday in a discussion, Channing basically showed us, based on his GTAP simulations, that there would be some welfare gains for countries, including those in Asia, if they were to liberalize trade with each other, given the current unilateral US tariff policies. Now, my question is, how likely might this outcome be? What does it take for this kind of outcome to be ignited? And is it possible at all, given the global condition these days? And if it is possible, could this kind of concerted action bring the freer global trade back to the agenda again? I'd like to hear your views on this. Thank you very much.
From which expert, Arif?
Perhaps all, but maybe I don't know. This is an open question, basically, and this is very much
Marie, go ahead.
Yes. Marie's point about open regionalism and multilateralism.
Got it. Marie will respond. Go ahead, Marie.
I will respond, but of course, any other panelists can add. Basically, in our own, we also did simulations regarding what would help to offset the negative impact of the tariff from the US and the uncertainty. And it turns out that if you really fully implemented RCEP or even some of the other agreements, you can more than offset the negative impact from the US, right? So I think Prem, you had some critique, let's say, on GTAP modeling, but it tells you what is possible. Okay, but how do you actually?
Really,
I think it's a simulation, right? Based on we reduce the tariffs to zero, we reduce the non-tariff barriers to zero. What will happen? But I think it's kind of also in a way some common sense if you're going to open up your markets with each other. But I think what our finding was that yes, that's true, but it does require you to implement those agreements effectively. And really address the constraints that are faced by investors and the private sector in terms of being able to realize the diversified global value chain or regional value chain that matters for all of us. And that does require us to address all those issues that I alluded to earlier, whether it's rules of origin, non-tariff barrier, customs, standards, and even movement of people. Businesses also identified movement of talent as a constraint. And there was a proposal by the ASEAN Business Council to make it easier for business talent to move and work, even with ASEAN talent to move within ASEAN countries, for instance. So I think it's possible, but it will require leadership. In ASEAN, it would be at the moment, whoever's the chair of ASEAN. Indonesia, as the largest country, always also plays a role. RCEP is a bit more tricky. I will leave it to the other panelists. I think China and ASEAN and Japan should play a leadership role and not to leave out CPTPP. I think CPTPP and RCEP can be complementary.
We don't have a lot of time, but maybe 1 minute talk from Premachandra. Anything to say?
Yeah. I mean, under principle pragmatism, actually FTAs can become a part, but placing too much emphasis in, I do not have empirical evidence to support that. GTAP simulation simply ignore the rules of origin issue and then do all this Mickey Mouse simulation, assuming that entire declared tariff is transmitted to participants. This is a big problem. I think we have to consider FTAs as part of the strategy, but we should not forget the fact that US no longer has dominance in the world economy. 30 years ago, more than 40% of trade was accounted for US. But now US share has declined to about 10 to 8%. Therefore, still there is room for global economic initiative. And I think the regional agreement can play an important role in that through the negotiation process. But do not expect too much simply signing agreements, even though politicians like them because of photo opportunities.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Saon, anything to say?
One more thing to consider is, for example, the BRICS grouping, because the BRIC group, I mean, it's not from the region per se, but the meeting in Shanghai of the SCO, and that is another grouping to consider because that is also could lead to some possible greater cooperation among these countries. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, there is one question from the audience about development of digital financial technology for cross-border transaction. What are the major risks that nation and regulator should keep in mind to pursue this harmonization in digital and financial technology and payment? Liqing, anything to say?
Well, I think that is true that there will be some risks if we continue to promote the digital payments. One of the main risks is capital flight, and or in some countries that they still have a certain kind of capital controls. Within the digital payments framework, the capital control will be more or less more difficult than before. So I think as any countries, those who has worry about risk should should strengthen their macro prudential policies in deal with these capital flight risks.
Thank you. Dr. Song, anything to add from this discussion?
Oh, well, not much for financial integration.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I can
Yes.
just add a concluding remark,
Yes,
that I
please.
think at the end of the day, I think Prem has hit the nail on the head. Domestic reforms is what matters at the end of the day, but domestic reforms
exactly.
can be influenced or shaped by our regional agreements, and especially if they're like CPTPP, where we already have done our gap analysis. It does require us to actually upgrade a lot of things, and we are also acceding to the OECD, and that's another pressure. And it actually should help the right politicians to frame it in the right way for domestic reforms, but not an easy task to undertake domestic reforms.
Okay, so we are getting closer to the end of this panel. And then today we talked a lot about the current and the future supply chain landscape in Asia. And also we talked a lot about regional trade and some challenges related to that, such as rule of origin. And also there is a new area of cooperation like digital trade, green trade, payment. And so there are a lot of challenges posed by US and this economic security issue, but also there is a lot of opportunity for Asia to develop more higher value added, deeper integrated network. So I hope everybody learned a lot from today's panel, and I'd like to express gratitude to all excellent panelists, Mari Pangestu, Premachandra, Athukorala, and Saon and Yeongkwan Song, and Liqing Zhang. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sayuri.